for authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Marie D. Jones. She's going to be returning. And we're going to talk about two books she's recently had come out, Viral Mythology and The Grid of Reality. Both of them were fantastic books. I read them both. Now, her co-author, Larry, was going to attend the show with us. However, he had some holidays come up that we didn't foresee coming up that, we would have known about them, but it's not the sort of thing you thought about them at the time you made the appointment in the first place, because we made the appointment so far in advance. So Larry won't be able to join us, but I'm sure he's with us in spirit anyway. So, Marie, I got to tell you, this is the first, I think, that out of all the times I've interviewed you that I'm going to do you for two books at once.
Yeah. We have too many books that come out, so we have to kind of combine them.
Well, I told you not long ago that Nick Redfern was perhaps one of the most prolific writers that I had known of, because he turns out a book about once a year, and here you are trying to double his speed.
Actually, I think he does more than that, because he's got me and Larry way beat. He's like, every time I turn around, it's like, whoa, there's another one. So, yeah, he's very prolific. Well, we keep saying we're going to slow down, but then we don't, so.
Well, I guess they say idle minds are the devil's playground, so you have angels dancing around in yours.
Right.
So, I got to tell you, though, Viral Mythology and The Grid of Reality, those are like broad ways apart topic-wise.
They are, yeah.
So how do we get two books so far apart topic-wise in the span of less than a year?
Yeah, it's funny because we knew we wanted to do The Grid. That was a book that we'd been trying to pitch and get lined up for a couple of years, and we ended up finally getting it lined up with a different publisher than we normally go with Hierophant Hampton Roads. And it just so happened that shortly after that, we got Viral Mythology accepted at New Page Books, which was our publisher up until then. So it was kind of like, we can do both because they're so different. It just shows that we don't just want to write books about ghosts and UFOs. We don't just want to write really limited paranormal books. I've written now, this is my 13th Viral Mythology, I believe, and I think my 7th book with Larry. And we really want to write about what fascinates us. And we've sort of exhausted some of the other subject matter to where we kind of, we're starting to look outside the normal topics that people think of when they think paranormal. Where The Grid is all about a sort of hidden infrastructure of reality that might explain where paranormal phenomena comes from. So we always kind of tie it in. And even Viral Mythology, it's about our history and our hidden history and our alternate history. So we're always writing about the unknown in some way, but we can kind of go from one extreme to the other.
Very interesting take. Now, on the Viral Mythology, I noticed you covered many different ways that a lot of people say would not think of for communication, especially in today's world when everything seems to be cut and dried. You write letters, you get on the telephone, or you post emails or forum posts or something of that nature. Few people really think about, writing on papyrus or stones or cave walls, or hadn't been done in so many years. It's just not the first topic up for bids.
But you know what? I mean, look at you and I. We're exchanging information and ideas. We're doing it on the radio. We're doing it using the most modern technology available. And it all comes down to the exchange of ideas, the exchange of information, which really, if you think about it, is the foundation of who we are. But we were thinking about, well, how did that happen? Not even just thousands of years ago, but during primitive times. How were ideas and how was information exchanged between people? How did one region come up with information that another region came up with, even though they didn't have cell phones? They didn't have texting or social networking or emailing. They didn't have computers. They didn't have telephones. How did they communicate ideas across vast regions geographically at about the same time in our historical evolution? And so it just kind of grew out of that. I think that everything that we do comes down to information. And today, we take information viral globally in a matter of seconds. I mean, you can literally email somebody in China in a few seconds. You can go on Facebook or Twitter and, you know, see a message from some guy who lives in Norway. And it's just almost instantaneous. And yet, somehow, ideas and information from ancient times managed to survive and get to us today. And we've actually used that to create what we believe is our history.
Okay. Now, you say that we believe because we don't really know exactly what did happen back in the past, since we don't have enough information to really form definite conclusions?
Yeah, and that's the bummer about this whole thing, is we are only getting the information that survived and made it to us today, and then we have to interpret that properly. So it's kind of difficult to really piece together our history as a species, because a lot of the information probably never made it to us. A lot of the information probably got changed along the way. A lot of the information may have been suppressed along the way, lost, manuscripts and religious texts and historical writings that have been burned or destroyed, or whenever one country would conquer another, they would literally rewrite their history. So when we think we know what our history is as human beings, and yet the truth is we only know our history in terms of the information that survived and was able to make it to us today, all these thousands of years later.
Right. And also, before we go any further, I forgot to mention at the very beginning of the show that her website is www.mariedjones.com, and Larry's website is www.larryflaxman.com, and he's got another website that I don't remember the I think you got more than one website too, don't you, Marie?
We have one together. It's paraexplorers.com, P-A-R-A, paraexplorers.com. And then Larry has a paranormal investigative group called ARPAS, which is the Arkansas Paranormal and Anomalous Studies Team, and that is ARPAST, ARPAST.org. So we should combine them all into one big website, but the information kind of crosses over since we work together so closely.
Right. And, sometimes it does help to have more than one site on. I personally have another site I just put up today, called The Parent Help. I got in a conversation yesterday with a guy over at, Comcast Cable when I was trying to, do some DNS records on my email server about, parenting. It turns out he was a, 60-year-old parent, and I'm a 50-year-old, 4-year-old parent. We both have grown kids, but, we were talking about some of the challenges that, parents have, today.
That's a great idea, yeah.
And I thought, hey, I know how to put up a social network, a place where, parents and new, seasoned parents of grown kids, new parents, can all meet together, and the new parents can come and get advice about what worked from the original parents.
Right, because there's no manual that comes with the birth of a baby, huh? But that's the thing about today, is that we have so much information available to us at just, a few clicks of a mouse, and we're able to exchange ideas so readily. We're not inhibited by boundaries and borders and geographical locations. We can communicate quickly and easily across the board. So,
yeah, and now, can you imagine back in the ancient days when they'd have to paint something like that on a wall and wait for somebody to come by and respond? There was never been a case of somebody coming back responding on one of those, has there?
I know, and interpret properly what it was they were trying to tell them, because that was before we had any kind of writing systems. And then, once writing came along, you would think that it would have made communication easier, and it did in one sense, but it also made it a little more, it allowed for people to embellish the truth and to start kind of telling stories. And I think when it was all about having to inscribe something into the side of a cave or a rock, because it was such a difficult thing to do and it took a lot of time, probably what you did was important. This is something somebody needs to know about. When writing systems came along, it really sort of opened up communication to not just important ideas, but everything else.
Right.
So now here today, we have to weed through all that. So if we want to look for any kind of facts or, historical evidence of what really might have happened in the past, we have to look through all of the embellishment now.
Well, one of the things that would be, though, it might have been their way of communicating at the time, but communicating across different tribes or different nations or neighboring countries, I mean, even if they come around and they found the writing,
right,
because of the language barrier, they didn't even have the tools we have today to interpret what they found.
Exactly. They didn't have the computer translators. But I think that's one of the reasons why art and symbolism and using symbols and icons and images that were kind of readily understandable by everybody. I mean, everybody would know what certain animals look like. So if you painted or carved animal images in order to say to somebody, this is what's available for hunting and eating in this area, that would be pretty well understood. But yeah, when you start writing, and everybody is developing their own writing system, and even though some of them are all similar, like the Latin languages, they all have similar root languages, they're still very difficult for everybody to learn everybody else's language, and yet we all can easily understand certain symbols. I think a lot of times because they speak to us on to a different part of the brain, maybe to the subconscious more so. But that's, I think, why symbolism in art was always very important, because it was a sort of a universal way to communicate.
Yeah, you probably got a good point. And something I never really thought about until I read your book, Viral Mythology, was when you read the Bible, which I've read many a times, and
right.
let's say you come to the part about Abraham when he first meets the Pharaoh of Egypt. The way that's described in the Bible, with both parties speaking English and it not mentioning anything about there ever being a language barrier, people don't stop and realize when Abraham went into Egypt for the first time, did he speak a word of Egyptian, or did the Pharaoh understand Hebrew?
Exactly.
Or
we don't. Yeah.
was it a Hebrew Pharaoh on the throne at the time? I mean, because the Bible kind of puts it over in such a way that you wouldn't really know it from reading it today.
Right. You just assume everybody understood everyone and spoke the same language, and I don't necessarily think that's true. Possibly, Abraham could have had an interpreter with him or someone there who was able to interpret, but that's the hard part, is that we look at a religious text, whether it's the Bible or, the Hindu or Buddhist text, any religious text, but we always use the Bible just because it's the most, well-known, the most common. And we look at it and we read these stories and we try to figure out what is purely imaginative or story or myth, and what might be actually accurate and true and be literally talking about a historical event or a natural event that occurred or real people that actually lived. And it becomes kind of hard to do that unless you get some kind of information that you can verify in another form, either in other writings that came out during the same time period that sort of back that up or corroborate it, or when you have people who are doing archaeological excavations, if they're able to literally dig up and find physical proof or physical evidence to back up, this village was here or these people lived here and so,
Which is very hard to do because they change
right,
names.
Right. So without that, we're really left with this big gap of trying to interpret properly something that was written at a time that we weren't there, and we don't necessarily 100% know what their motives and their agendas were, what their thought processes were, and it just becomes very difficult to piece together all of the pieces of history. I think it's like a big, giant jigsaw puzzle with 25,000 pieces, and we only have 10,000. And I think every year...
more missing than that.
Yeah, or maybe even less, huh? But we find new pieces all the time as there are more excavations that reveal, this could be the possible village of so-and-so that was discussed in, one part of the Old Testament or what have you. And that's really exciting.
Ahmed Osman was writing this very thing you're saying in his book, Lost City of the Exodus, when they were trying to find the actual lost city of the Exodus, because sometimes there was like a fortress with the name like Zaru, Z-A-W-R.
Right.
Then it would be the city of Zaru, and they had to determine which one was which period went with which period, who was the king of this period during this period to help identify it. And the way he described it, it was a real convoluted, mixed up thing to figure out.
Yeah, I don't envy those people. And a lot of times they end up arguing and debating with each other because they each have their own interpretation of what has been discovered. And that is a tough field. I mean, archaeology is a tough field to be in because you're literally finding pieces to a puzzle you may not have the box for, so you can't see the big picture that you're actually trying to put together. And then, of course, you've got different archaeologists that have, different ways of thinking about things, different theories about how something might be interpreted. And then you bring in the historians and anthropologists and all the other scientific fields, the geologists, that might help you back up your evidence or your theory. And it's just painstaking and difficult to try to piece together everything. And we're still digging up cities that were buried on top of cities, and then there's a city underneath, and it's like, oh wow, we didn't know that was there.
And sometimes the city underneath had an entirely different name.
Yeah, and we're starting to realize that, wow, we may have been around longer than we thought. Civilization may be so much older, and it just changes everything. But it's funny how we still kind of walk around with this set picture of what our history is.
Now, we got in the chat room, somebody here is saying the Quran, in all actuality, is probably the most cited religious text in existence today. I didn't know it was that quoted. Did you?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's quite surpassed Christianity yet as the most, Islam as being the biggest religion in the world, but I know it's pretty close, so that would make sense in that case. But I would say that in terms of here in the United States, in terms of religious scholarship, much of the study is the Bible, the Old and New Testament. If you are a religious scholar in the truest sense, obviously you're going to be studying every religious text. But it seems like there's an awful lot of emphasis here in the States and I think also when you look at the United Kingdom and a lot of the work that's done there too, we seem to focus more on looking at the Bible. But again, I think you have to look at all of the religious texts to get a true understanding of our history, because each one is the mythology of a particular group of people in a particular region of the world. And when I say mythology, I'm not necessarily saying it's not true, but it is the mythology of a region. And in myth, there is a lot of truth. There is a lot of factual information that is encoded and has to be interpreted properly. So, but yeah, I think I heard that Islam was either poised to take over Christianity or maybe already had, in terms of the number of believers in the world.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I know that you're right about having to, use all the scripture for comparison. I mean, the Abrahamic faith has we know of about 3 or 4 branches. It's got the Judaism, the Christianity,
right.
and the Islam, and the Baha'i faith, I think.
Baha'i, right.
If you're going to understand any one of them, it helps to know a little something about all of them. But then
all of them.
Get into another danger
think about
zone.
It, Muhammad was considered the third prophet. So to get a good understanding of the entirety of that religion, the big three, I guess we could call them, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I mean, those are all religions that have such commonalities. And with, Moses and then Christ and then Muhammad being the 3 prophets, I don't know that you can get a really good, well-rounded idea without looking at the Quran and looking at the life of Muhammad, because he did fulfill another part of the prophecies that were begun in Judeo-Christianity. But, that's a huge job, and it's certainly an overwhelming one to look at all of those texts and try to figure out what might be really true and what was embellishment or interpretation or somebody's perception or done for political spin. Just as we do today in our news reporting, in our writing, in our documentation. It's hard to dig out the truth.
Well, it's hard to dig it out from mainstream, but it's been very hard here lately, even to do it from alternative news sources. There's so many out there today that their bias operated off of. And sometimes their biases don't let them see the full picture.
Exactly, and that's really frustrating, because I remember, 20 years ago, the alternative press they were the truth tellers, and they've sort of fallen into the same trap now with the biases and the spins and leaning one way or the other, so that we are really left with more of a mess to try to find the little nuggets of truth in. And I can only imagine that because human beings probably haven't changed too much in terms of our general behavior over thousands of years, that the same thing probably applied in the past, that there were writings that were done for whatever reason, the religious texts or the historical documentation, that had spin. They were written to promote a certain agenda or a certain belief system, and are not necessarily, they say there's 3 sides to every story. There's, his side, her side, and then the truth in the middle. And I think it's up to us now to try to find that middle ground when we look at our own past.
And that's a job in itself. But, this is something I think I remember you covered in your book, Viral Mythology, about the different reasons why different people were writing these texts and, the messages they were trying. I think you did cover the biases in that book, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have cultural, you have societal, you have, biases that come from what your region has in terms of traditional beliefs or any kind of religious belief, or how they look at nature, what their relationship is with nature, how they interact with each other. So every region is going to have, I think that's how dialects and accents. I mean, here in America, you know, we have people with Southern accents. We have people with New York accents. We have, you know, people with Western drawls or whatever. Yet we're all one country. But it just shows how if you live in a particular region, there are influences put upon you that will make you have differences in your behavior, in the way that you communicate, and even the way that you sound. And that applied in ancient times as well. So, you know, we're also stuck with looking at different regional writings and different regional, even oral traditions, and having to try to remember that that particular region may have had some beliefs that were different from this region.
Right.
I think that one of the real keys, though, is to look for the commonalities. And like with comparative mythology and comparative religion, what you do is you look for the common themes. Excuse me. You look for the common motifs, the common symbols, the common elements, the common ideas. And that really, I think, more than anything, gives us an idea of what might have been true. You know, like the flood myth. If you've got 20 different religious texts from all over the globe from 12,000 years ago that have some kind of flood story, we can kind of assume that there was a big flood, you know?
All right. Now, we had a caller call in if you want to go ahead and take the call. Actually, I've already put them live on the air. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I was listening, and you was saying earlier about how daunting of a task it is to connect all the various mythologies and religions around the world. I can definitely attest to that. Back when I was in college, I wasn't studying comparative mythologies or anything like that. I was just doing independent research because I had this overwhelming feeling that I'd been lied to my whole life about everything: history, politics, mythology.
Right.
You know, so I started studying as much stuff as I could in so many different areas, and what I was wanting to do was get an idea of what happened in our ancient past, because you know, I grew up in church, in the Christian church, although I wasn't really, I left that as a kid and didn't pursue that any further in my teens and stuff. But I got to studying everything, and I realized, wow, I am not smart enough to figure this out, because it's hard. It's really hard to draw associations between the mythology of one region, like say South America and Egypt, because the mythologies are so different. The deities are different. The stories are different. There's not much commonality really between the deities and what they were deities of and what they supposedly did and stuff. And I realized there's just no way to connect all. What I wanted to do was connect all the religions and get an idea of what really happened. But I realized that there was no way to do that, because all of the religions, well, I call them religions. At one time, they were the religions of the people that were there.
Exactly.
Today we call them mythology, but as if the things that they said back then when they were experiencing them is just all made up stuff, you know. They call it mythology, like, you know, it's not important, like, you know.
Right, exactly.
The Bible is the be-all and end-all truth, and it come from God, and all this, and all the other stuff is just mythology. It's fake stuff, even though the people that were coming up with that mythology as their religion at the time were the ones actually experiencing these things at the time it was happening.
And it was their way of communicating what they were experiencing with the vocabulary and understanding of nature that they had at the time. So they had a very limited way of describing what was happening to them. And they did it through story, which, we've been doing since time began, and I think we still do in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but I came to the conclusion that after doing, 6 or 8 years research on first this and then that, not just mythology and stuff, but, history and politics and everything. But as far as my conclusions on the mythology part is that we will probably never know exactly what happened in the past, because there is absolutely no way to connect the mythologies of South America to the mythologies of Egypt and stuff like that. Now, in certain regions like the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, people that were in a particular geographic region, there are parallels to draw in their mythologies.
Because you're talking about things that happened, like natural disasters that happen on a regional basis. So it got woven into the fabric of their stories.
Right, and
that's why I like Joseph Campbell. I mean, I think Joseph Campbell was masterful at looking at the regional myths and the commonalities, but also in terms of global mythology, the fact that there were common archetypes that do show up in every myth, but they're described completely differently in accordance with what goes on regionally. So like you said, every region can be so different from every other. I mean, my life in Southern California is much different from somebody's life in Guam or, South Africa or what have you. So we're always going to describe our regional experiences differently, but there still were those sort of archetypal motifs that we all understood that had a universality to them. That's what I loved about Joseph Campbell, because he was able to find that stuff when, most people were focusing on, well, we want to know if this volcano really erupted at this time, and those kinds of things happen on a regional level unless they are catastrophic in a sense that they affect almost the entire globe. I think the flood myth is probably one of the few across the board common motifs that you find in just about every religious text, every myth, the Epic of Gilgamesh and great stories and poems and ballads, because obviously something must have happened 12,000 years ago, and we have a lot of scientists that are attesting to the fact that something probably did. It was a global threat, and it could have been an asteroid that passed by or some, what have you, but it happened on a global level. But most of what happened to these people, just like today, even though we've got the internet and ways to reach people in other parts of the world, we still have our own regional things that impact us that really kind of only mean something to us in our communities where we live. So, yeah, it is tough. Comparative mythology, comparative religion, these are still fairly new areas of study because people like you saw the need to, hey, who's going to put all this together? This is just insane. There's so much to go through, and, it's like digging for that little needle in the haystack.
Well, at the time I was doing the study and started the studies, I was in my early 20s, and I kind of had a limited worldview at the time, because as you get older, your worldview kind of expands.
Right.
My worldview at the time was that I thought all these different deities in various regions were the same deities. My personal thought on the matter was that these ancient gods were the same beings as the fallen angels of the Bible, and what these beings were not angels or gods at all, but extraterrestrials.
That's the ancient alien, ancient astronaut theory, and we wrote about that in great detail because that is a theory that is more popular today than ever. Yeah,
but see, my deal was I was thinking that the gods in Egypt were the same as the gods in South America, and it was limiting my ability to understand what I was reading because I was trying to look at it from that perspective. But if you look at it as maybe the ancient astronauts were there and different groups were like
makes a little more sense.
Yeah, different groups were in different areas of the world. It makes more sense. But at the time that I was looking at it, I was under the impression or the thought, the mindset that the deities of South America was the same as the deities in Egypt, was the same as the deities in Mesopotamia, and was the same as the deities in the Indus Valley, and it just confused the crap out of me. But now that I've kind of expanded my worldview and got older and kind of refined my vision, by saying that there was different groups in different areas for whatever reason or another that they may have had, based on my opinion that these angels and gods and whatever were extraterrestrials, it makes more sense now, I think, than it did from that perspective many years ago. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think our like you said, our view of the world around us has evolved as we've evolved, and so new theories and new ideas come along that expand the possibility of what our past was. A lot of people also theorize that the gods and deities were really just primitive and ancient people's ways of describing nature, because they didn't understand the science of an earthquake or an erupting volcano or a comet passing overhead, and therefore
the gods are angry. They smite us.
exactly, and that was like their natural way of responding and reacting. Oh, we're being punished. The gods are speaking. And so, and as our scientific knowledge advanced, we began to realize, well, no, this is what an earthquake does, and here's what a volcano does. And those gods and goddesses that we created to represent those things in nature kind of disappeared over time. So, it's
now now we understand a lot more now, like especially like in earthquakes and stuff. We understand plate tectonics now, whereas before in our ancient past we didn't. Although we
didn't even understand thunder and lightning, and we thought it was, some god who was angry.
Yeah, we thought it was magic. Some god using magic on us.
Yep. We've evolved a little.
Yeah, but something I've been debating a lot recently. I don't know if you cover this in your book or have thought about this, but I have come to the conclusion that, a lot of people, first let me start at a lot of people. A lot of people think that the extraterrestrials are a benevolent force. They're here to help us and make us evolve and this, that, and all this other. Personally, I do not believe so. My own personal opinion on the matter now is that the aliens are actually creating bad weather and disasters and everything to keep us down and keep us basically subservient to them so that we don't reach a technological level of being able to compete with them for authority over our planet.
That's an interesting perspective, We may never know.
I doubt we will, and our government definitely won't tell us, although our government, I believe, sincerely believe, and have reason to believe, that our government is actually working with some of these extraterrestrials. But they're not going to tell us that that they're even real, admit to us that they're even real, let alone that they're working backroom deals with them for technology or this, that, and all this other.
Yeah. Well, from a scientific perspective, my feeling is that if one type of alien civilization can visit, 1 million can. And we may possibly have in the past, and even today, have been interacting with a number of different aliens, and some may be good, some may be bad, and some may be ugly, just like human beings. I mean, I don't see why they would be any different. And some may just be observing us the same way that we observe animals out in the wild when we make our National Geographic specials, the mountain gorilla in the wild. But, I mean, that's a theory that part of our history was assisted by alien intervention. And we don't have proof, but we don't have proof that it didn't happen. And again, it's finding those puzzle pieces, and until they all fit together, there are so many different theories that people are chasing down. And, finding some really interesting evidence, well, I'm losing my voice, to back up each one, but we still just don't have that complete picture yet. So maybe someday.
Yeah, I'm 32 or 3. I don't know. I stopped counting birthdays. I'm one of the two. But I doubt that even in my lifetime, especially on the extraterrestrial issue, I doubt in my lifetime that anything will ever get revealed publicly by our government or any other governments that extraterrestrial races may be in contact with and aiding or whatever. I doubt any kind of disclosure will happen in my lifetime. Maybe in my kids' or grandkids' lifetimes, but certainly not mine.
You may be surprised.
Yeah.
I doubt it. I think the governments of the world are still milking the ETs for everything they can.
Did you say your name was Thomas?
No, who?
Well, you keep saying I doubt it. You ever heard Doubting Thomas?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that, yeah. I didn't catch the reference. Well, I'm sorry. I'll get off the phone and let you two get back to your...
Well, thank you. Thank you for your call. Good conversation.
Thanks for calling in. I really appreciate that. I just had to have a little fun at the end. I hope you don't take it personal.
Oh, I'm not angry.
Only time will tell. Only time will tell. Huh?
Yes, ma'am. Well, you guys have a good evening. I'll go back to listening.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
I just honestly could not resist that. But we're running low on the time clock, and I wanted you to have a chance to talk about the reality grid now that we talked a little bit about the viral mythology. I got to hand it to you on this one. Not to down your other book, because I did like it, but I really kind of like the grid better.
I think it's more up people's alley right now with all of the talk of the multiverse and alternate realities and parallel universes, and the idea that we may be experiencing more than one reality at a time. It's such a popular idea, and it's one that we see in our pop culture and our movies and TV series and books, and with all of the cutting edge physics coming out, it's just something that everybody's talking about. So for Larry and I, it really was about trying to give a sort of visual image to what we thought reality might actually look like. Is there an infrastructure? We always talk about one reality, but the truth is I think most of us pretty much are aware that there's more than one. And, coming at it from the angle of a visual of a three-dimensional grid where you've got different levels of reality that have connectors between them. We use the image of a skyscraper where you've got different floors. You could have hundreds of floors, and there are different ways that you can get from one floor to another via elevator, escalator, stairs, a pulley system, or a fire escape. And that could be the way that the infrastructure of the whole of reality might be. The one that you and I are talking in now, this is just one level of the grid.
Yeah, and one of the things that you did mention, and I'll mention this right now because I've heard people comment on this, that if you're looking for a scientific essay on this here topic written by a college professor or scholar, that's not exactly what this here book is. It is, however, a very well thought out, very well investigated and researched book, and it's fantastic reading if you ask me. But don't expect a lot of technical terms, which I think a lot of people probably wouldn't have understood anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we have, really for us, this is an introductory book to something that I wrote about since I wrote science, many years ago, the quantum physics and the paranormal. And Larry and I wrote more about it in the resonance key and deja vu enigma. And the idea being that there are concepts that are very easy to sort of understand if they're presented on a lay audience level. And what we do is we do include a lot of scientific studies. We're not writing like a physics textbook. I don't want to read those. I don't think anybody else does unless you're taking physics. But the idea is to present the concepts, introduce what is going on in the cutting-edge world of theoretical physics and quantum physics, and also the study of new science, the science of human consciousness, which is kind of becoming linked to the world of quantum physics. And also what we have to do as human beings, our own physiology and how our bodies and our brains and our consciousness may be working in conjunction with our environment to allow us to experience different levels of reality. And that is something that is kind of a new field of study. And it's something that Larry and I want to continue working on. We truly believe that everything from brain chemicals to hormone levels to what people eat, what they drink, genetic factors, all these things have to do with why some people seem to be more susceptible to paranormal phenomena than others, or have more experiences than others, or are able to achieve altered states of consciousness more so than others. So it's a big, wide open field, and I think the grid is kind of an introduction to what a lot of people are now writing about, and everybody's kind of writing about their different angles, and it all really works together to try to explain what the entirety of reality might be like. And that includes the paranormal, because to us, the paranormal is just activity that occurs on another level of reality in which we don't see the cause necessarily so much that we see the effects, the way that gravity works. We don't see the cause of gravity, we see the effects. It's an invisible force. So that's the approach that we took with this book.
Well, yeah, and I think it's pretty common knowledge that there is an unseen world in operation. I mean, it's not a real extreme, at least to me, leap of faith. You can't see an atom, but yet it's there. You can't see air, but yet it's there.
Yeah, exactly. We don't observe anything at the quantum level, and yet it is the foundation of the structure of reality. But people want proof. They want proof, that they can see. And I think we're at a time in history when science is really starting to give us that proof. It's starting to show that what occurs at the quantum level may also occur at the grander scale. And it's starting to show the observer effect and how it is at play in the manifestation and perception of reality, whether it's on an individual or a collective level. So it's kind of an exciting time to be talking about all this stuff.
Yeah, I would think it would be. I think it was just today I saw an article where they're now, I think it was in Massachusetts, have started to cryogenically freeze bodies, like they
saw that.
talked about. You see me sharing it probably.
Putting them into a state of suspended animation so that they can do very intricate, dangerous surgeries.
Or, keep them alive so they can do surgery.
Yeah, it's really weird because, this is like the science fiction of yesteryear.
Exactly.
And it's coming. Can you even imagine what's going to happen over the next 20, 30, 50 years? It's just mind-boggling. And I still think that if you were to show a cell phone to somebody who lived 100 years ago, they would think you were from Harry Potter. I mean, it would be magic to them. And so I think it's only a matter of time before we find proof of parallel worlds, of other realities that we may exist in, an infinite number of them, of alternate dimensions, that we might exist in different timelines. And, you know, people say, oh, that's just science fiction. Well, now it is. But science fiction has a funny way of becoming science fact once the scientific community catches up to it. And it's just, when I saw that article, I thought, I heard a lot of people saying, oh, and I thought, you know what, though, if you had a traumatic injury and you were going to die, yeah, go ahead and let them put you in a state of suspended animation if it might possibly save your life so that they can revive you afterwards.
Well, you get down to that kind of point, you're going to die if you don't do it, so what you got to lose?
Exactly, yeah, you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But give it a shot, you know, and it's another cutting-edge technology that probably was written about, you know, 100 years ago in science fiction novels, and certainly over the last 50 years. It's mind-boggling. You see that stuff and you think, whoa. Pretty soon we're going to have the, in Star Trek where you stand in the thing and you have Scotty beam you up, you know, to another place.
Or you'll have stargates. We may not be that far away from having stargates to different towns, different countries, different planets, who knows, different dimensions. I mean,
exactly.
What all can a Stargate go to? I mean, I know William Henry, I'm sure you've heard of him. Mm-hmm. He believes that they had Stargates back in ancient times, and the biblical Israelites out in the desert had it, for example. We have no proof of it, but again, we have no proof they did not either.
Right. Well, I think there was a lot of wisdom and knowledge that the ancients had that over time was either suppressed, silenced, lost, and we're now just sort of it's almost like we say, well, we're discovering it, but we're not. We're almost just like rediscovering it. It just got all buried. And now we have the technology to maybe make a lot of those things on a mass production scale. We can have stargates everywhere. But, I mean, we know that these types of wormholes, and people call them portals, that they most likely, I know they're still theoretical to a point, but they most likely exist on a cosmic scale. So is it possible that there are similar wormholes like that right here on Earth that are not so big and unwieldy, and could places like the Bermuda Triangle or the Devil's Triangle or Sedona or any of these other places be areas where there is that veil between realities is thin enough that somebody can cross over if they know the right, if they're there at the right time. Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Right. And, I personally think myself, if we find this kind of technology, we can have Stargate that can do all these different things or go these different places. I think every home and every place of business ought to have one, so that if you wanted to go grocery shopping, you could have your own cart in your home and you just walk right into the Stargate and have it come out at the grocery store, and then when you go home, you do the same thing.
You never have to leave your house, really.
It'd be like walking out of one room into another, but the other room's on the other end of town.
Exactly. It's another dimension. Or like, it's Star Trek, right, where they order the food from that thing that just sort of zaps it. Like, it's almost like a vending machine where they just zap the food into being, and there it is.
But
yeah, it's
talks
amazing.
About similar possibilities. I mean, as far as portals and Stargates, I believe. I mean, I read the book, and I remember it said something in there that one of the means of possibly tapping another dimension could be a Stargate. I think you might have mentioned, if I remember.
Oh, absolutely. The idea of wormholes, and that comes right from physics. And I know, there's no proof that there are wormholes that would allow a person to go through and survive, but that's because we're operating on a very limited scientific understanding. And we're also not sure that maybe wormholes don't exist in another form. They may exist in a form that allows our consciousness to do the traveling. not necessarily
or perhaps
our
once
bodies.
Our atoms are all scattered like you do in that Beam Me Up.
Right, and then they reassemble on the other side. And we laugh about that, but, it's possible. And somebody will eventually come up with the math behind it and the way to make a device that will allow us to do that. And it's really not so far-fetched anymore when you look at just in the last 50 years how technology has. I mean, I still look at people looking at their cell phones, and they're doing computer work on their cell phones and texting people across the world. That was thought to be impossible, 50 years ago?
Next year I'll be conducting my show from the theater while I'm watching the movie.
See, there you go. And it's just, we have to look at how far we've come in order to imagine how far we can go. So I don't think anything is impossible, and it almost scares me. Like, oh boy, where's it gonna end?
For my books, things only become impossible once you make them impossible. Up until then, you never really know.
Right, and I remember some great writer saying that if it can be imagined or conceived, it can be achieved, and that if the mind can imagine something, there then exists the means by which that can be made into something physical. So I kind of think, the sky and beyond is the limit.
Okay. Well, I said we've been at this for an hour, and I know you got to get with Max.
Yes.
I don't want to rob you of an opportunity to talk about yours and Max's book real quick, like that. You and me's going to do another show about.
We will. That'll be fun. Yeah, just as a change of pace, I'm starting to do a lot of fiction. This is kind of my first love. But my son and I wrote a book called Echo, Evil Kid Hunting Organization together, and it just came out last month. And it is based on literally a real-life spy organization that he created when he was in elementary school with his friends. And they were being bullied, and the idea was to kind of spy on the bullies and keep an eye on them and stay one step ahead of them. And it just sort of exploded into this huge group that everybody wanted to be a part of, and they had their own website, and they had missions and different ranking systems and trials and tests for new kids that wanted to join. And I just was so fascinated by what my son was doing at the time that when I mentioned it to a TV producer a couple of years later, she was like, "Oh my God, you have to write a book about that." I just said, "Oh yeah, all right, well maybe." And we just finally decided to do it before he forgot everything. And it's just really shows how kids can be resourceful with ways of fighting bullying, and how kids can come together and have these really resourceful, creative ways of dealing with things at school. So we're actually working on book 2, which will come out February of 2015. And we're adding in a real sort of science fiction touch to it to make it even more fun. So, but it's just been really cool. I wrote a book with my dad, as you know, about supervolcano, and now I've written a book with my son. So I kind of feel like, hey, that's really cool. The
true generational mom.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to have to turn that book of your son's into a sitcom that kids can watch on a weekly basis, or
that's in the works. That's about all I'm allowed to say at this point, but yeah, that's definitely something that's being looked at.
Well, yeah, because I would think that it would make a movie plus a sitcom, because it's got the potential to be ongoing, because you can always throw new circumstances into each episode.
Absolutely. These kids were like little spies, and it was just the funniest thing. But it was so sophisticated that it blew my mind. And it just shows you that the kids today, to them, technology is just second nature.
Well, something to be used and taken advantage of, that's for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Let us exploit.
Yeah.
But I think they got the right attitude. What's the use in having it if you don't exploit it?
Exactly, and use it to your benefit.
That's what I do with that hamburger every time. Okay, but we're going to go ahead and call this one here a wrap before my wife gets in and the dogs get all set off
through
the door. real quick, like once again, you can learn more about her at www.mariedjones.com. And Larry has his own website at www.larryflaxman.com. They both have a website at www.paraexplorers.com. And Larry's other website is rpass.com.
Rpass.org.
Oh,
he has to be different, you know?
I was close. I was getting it good that time, too. But, and you can also scroll down. I got her picture and his picture, the book covers, their bios, the descriptions of the books, and right there below all that, I've got links to where you can get the books on Amazon. I'll be moving all this to my archives probably tomorrow morning if I have time. Hopefully, if not Friday, and I'll be adding it to YouTube and linking back to it at my site. So, folks, feel free to always come by and listen to it. I'll be sending everybody, including Marie, a link to the archive so everybody know exactly where to find it. Marie, is there anything that you wanted to throw out there real quick, like at the last minute?
Just thank you so much for having me on again. It's always such a great conversation.
Well, thank you, Marie. I really, really do appreciate that. And, you know, I've had you on there at my show enough times that over the years, I think we can consider each other old pals now.
That's right. We are.
All righty. Well, I'm going to call that one a wrap, folks. Thank you very much for listening. Couldn't have a show without my listeners any more than I could have a show without a guest. You did nothing but listen. You participated, and I appreciated it. Don't forget to have all your friends come by and see me at Talk Now Radio. And also, if you want to visit me on Thursdays, I'll be at Revolution Radio. You click on the chat room over there and click on Studio A. On the player, you could join the chat. You don't even have to have a membership over there. You just give it a username. If you want to reserve a username, you have to sign up to reserve it though. Otherwise somebody else can come in and take it from you. I want to remind everybody that Talk Now Radio and Revolution Radio are both listener supported. We're only able to stay on the air through the advertising, like the Google links I have up at the top of my page, the YouTube videos on the archives. If you let the ads run, we get a commission off of those ads, so don't be clicking out of the ads or skipping them, please, if you don't mind. We got a donation meter. This helps us be able to bring you the news that the mainstream won't bring you because we don't have a sponsor to listen to, so don't forget to keep us supported if you want to keep us on the air. Y'all have a good night, and don't forget to come see me tomorrow over at Revolution Radio at www.freedomslips.com. My guest will be Fritz Springmeier. We're going to be talking about Illuminati Bloodlines, his book. Matter of fact, I'm not sure, but I think he has more than one book. We'll see you then. At least I hope to see you there. Good night.